As a data analyst or someone transitioning into data, have you ever had this moment where you're in an interview or in a stakeholder meeting and someone says, yeah, the data looks right, but what does this actually mean for our business? And you have a small bit of panic because you know that your dashboard is built correctly, you know your SQL is clean and your charts are accurate, but the story behind the numbers feels fuzzy. I see this in analysts that I work with all the time. They can build a dashboard in their sleep, but the moment someone asks, so what's the so what here? Then they feel like they can't answer this question like a real data analyst. If this applies to you, you have what I call a business language gap, which means you can overcome this by starting to understand the thinking behind business metrics. So today we're going to cover the top 10 metrics that every data analyst should know, grouped into 4 key families that is going to help you form a mental model of all business metrics. So they can go from sounding like you're just a dashboard to actually being able to tell the so what and the story behind the numbers. And stick with me because at the end, I'm going to give you a pro tip about how to sound like an experienced analyst before you step into an interview. If you're new here, I'm Christine. I spent a decade in data as an analyst and then became a hiring manager and a data director. And now I help working professionals and data analysts stand out in the job market and on the actual job through my mentorship program. If that sounds helpful to you, make sure to check that out down below and let's dive in. So the first family of metrics is money coming in. And the first metric here is revenue, which is total dollars in. Now we all know that, but what smart analysts understand is that while revenue is a North Star metric that everyone in the company cares about, the story behind revenue is much more telling than the top line revenue number itself. That's because revenue on its own doesn't actually tell you at all about the health of a business. Revenue could be going up while costs are going up even faster, which, fun fact, is not actually a success story. So when someone says something like revenue has risen by 15% this quarter, a smart analyst knows that the next question isn't just great, what's next? It's where is that growth actually coming from and is that growth sustainable? A quick note on how this number shows up across industries. In SaaS or anything selling some kind of subscription or software, you might hear something like ARR or MRR, which stands for annual recurring revenue or monthly recurring revenue. For any company that is selling a physical product, you might hear something like total sales or just revenue. And for a consulting company, for example, you might hear something like total project billings. It's slightly different terminology across industries, but they all mean the same concept. So revenue is always a good number to know, but the real health indicators behind it are the customers and also how much each customer is worth, which is what we're going to talk about next. So metric number 2 is ARPU or AOV. So if revenue is the total dollars coming in, then ARPU or AOV is the value of each customer or transaction. So in a SaaS business or anything that's selling some kind of subscription, you might hear something like ARPU, which is average revenue per user. In something selling products like e-commerce, you might hear something like AOV, so average order value. And in anything that's B2B, so a company that's actually selling to other businesses, let's say a consulting firm, you might hear something like ACV, which is average contract value. Again, different acronyms, but same idea. How much is each customer or transaction bringing in? Now, here's why this detail matters. Let's say Apple increased their revenue by 20% in one quarter. Sounds great. The finance team sounds really happy. They sent an enthusiastic Slack message. But then if you look underneath the hood, you see that their average order value has actually dropped by 25% in that same time frame. What does this actually mean? It means that they started selling more of their cheaper products. So let's say AirPods, products that are on the lower end of their price list compared to their more premium products like MacBooks. So even though revenue went up, the product mix actually got weaker, which isn't a good sign in the long run. Now, this is one of the first things that we look at when we're hiring analysts, which is not just, can you report on this top line number, but also, can you understand the main drivers behind what contributed to this top line number and why it changed? So average order value and ARPU is usually one of the first places we start when we're thinking about how revenue has gone up or down. By the way, if you want to shortcut your understanding of business metrics and be able to speak about them like an experienced analyst, then I highly recommend you grab my business metrics cheat sheet down below. It's probably going to save you like 20 hours of Googling because it covers the top metrics that every analyst should know across specific industries, as well as how to speak about them so you sound like a knowledgeable analyst from day one. So make sure to grab that down below. So now we've covered money coming in, time for the less glamorous question, which is how much of that money actually goes out and how much of this money do we actually get to keep? So metric number 3 is gross margin. Gross margin is what you keep after subtracting out the cost of delivering your product or service. So for example, let's take Netflix. Netflix charges each user $15 per month. And let's say that the cost of actually hosting and delivering and streaming the videos is like $8 per person per month. So they get to keep 7 out of 15 of every dollar that they charge, which is about a 46% gross margin. Now, here's what I find pretty interesting is that even though companies have the same top line revenue number, let's say two companies both post $5 million in revenue in one quarter, but they can be in totally different financial health because a SaaS company that has 80% gross margin is doing much better than a sports retailer that only gets to keep 25% of their revenue. So when I was hiring candidates, one question we used to ask was, if revenue is going up, but gross margin is shrinking, then what would you look into next? And the analysts who stood out always understood that gross margin shrinking when revenue going up usually means that something is happening with the expenses, the costs, or discounting or promotions. And they knew that they would have to loop in the finance, product, or marketing team to actually investigate it further. Now, in terms of how this applies across industries, so SaaS margins are usually pretty high because the cost of delivering the service is usually just around the actual technology, whereas for a retailer or someone actually selling a physical product usually have smaller margins because they have a lot of costs around inventory, delivery, operational costs, and also returns also into that. And for consulting, the main cost is the actual people that they are employing to work on these projects. So across industries, we all have our different benchmarks, again, of gross margin, but the main question is the same. How much does it actually cost to deliver one unit of value, and how much are we keeping after that? Now, one of my students actually used this understanding of business metrics to not only land a new job, but pivot into an analytics role. And I want to share his story with you just as a bit of motivation. So he had been laid off from Microsoft about a year ago. And when he was interviewing for a labor analyst role at Palms Casino Resort, he actually created a forecasting model that demonstrated his understanding of their top metrics. So it was labor hours, labor costs, and other resources. And he showed that model to the hiring manager in an interview. Needless to say, the manager was super impressed by his domain knowledge, even though he's coming from another industry. And when he got that offer, he actually told me that he'd been laid off from Microsoft a year ago. And so pivoting into new industry and also getting an analyst job feels like a double win. So that just goes to show you how much understanding business metrics can be a game changer when it comes to job hunting and interviews. So metric number 4 is CAC, or customer acquisition cost. It's basically just how much it costs to bring in a new customer. So the formula here is total spend used to acquire a new customer divided by the number of new customers you got in that period of time. Now, it sounds kind of straightforward, but realistically on the job, finance, marketing, and leadership all have to agree on what is actually captured in this numerator. So does spend also count team salaries, tools, events, or does it only count marketing spend? And so usually these definitional changes can make a really big difference in how this metric actually looks. So on the job, it's really important to understand exactly how each of these metrics are actually defined, because if you change this definition, it's really easy to make this metric go up or down. So going back to our Netflix example, let's say they have a $90 CAC. So they spent about $90 on average acquiring a new customer. Now, again, this is just an example, so I'm just making up the numbers here. But is this number good or bad? To be honest, on its own, you cannot really understand whether a company's CAC is good or bad. It almost always has to be looked at in comparison to another metric, which we're going to talk about next. So family number 3 is customer behavior, which has a metric that is going to be related to CAC, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Before we dive in here, it's important to understand the different business models when it comes to who companies actually sell to. So there is B2C, that's when people are selling to actual individuals or customers. So think of companies like Sephora or Lululemon, they're selling to an individual person. Then there's B2B, so companies that sell to other businesses. So any kind of SaaS company that has like an enterprise solution, for example, Vimeo Enterprise, they sell to other companies, and so they're counted as B2B. Then there are also companies that are technically B2B2C. Yes, it's a real term, I did not make that up. For example, I have a student right now who works at Penguin Random House as an analyst, and Penguin Random House creates and publishes books that obviously go to individuals, but they also mostly sell to large retailers like Amazon and Barnes & Nobles. So that's why I would consider them somewhere in the middle, so B2B2C. So whenever you're interviewing for a company or onboarding onto a new job, it's really important to understand who they actually sell to and what business model they're a part of. That's really good background context for the metrics we're going to talk about next. So metric number 5 is lifetime value, which is the total expected value or revenue that a customer is expected to bring in over their entire relationship with a business. So back to Netflix, let's say that on average, a customer who pays $15 per month is expected to stay with Netflix for 3 years or 36 months. Now, I'm sure there are many, many outliers on the higher end, you know who you are, but on that case, the customer's lifetime value is $540. Now, compare this to ARPU, which we discussed earlier. The ARPU is estimated to be $15. So ARPU is the money that you're actually coming in with today, whereas lifetime value is the money you're expected to get from that customer over the entire time that they stay with you. As you can see, the customer acquisition cost, or the CAC that we discussed earlier, only makes sense when you actually compare it to how much you're expected to get from this customer over the time that they're with you. So in our Netflix example, when we had a $90 CAC and the LTV is $540, we want to calculate what we call the LTV to CAC ratio. In this Netflix example, that LTV to CAC ratio is about 6, and a healthy industry benchmark is around 3 to 1. So in this example, Netflix would be doing really, really well. So if you're an analyst working with any kind of product marketing or like product operations team, you probably will hear about this ratio, LTV to CAC, because it is one of the strongest signals of whether or not a company's growth engine is actually working. So metric number 6 is the number of customers. Now, this sounds like it's probably something that's really easy to calculate, but let me tell you, it is not. So one of the first questions is usually definitional, which is just who actually counts as a customer. If we are working with a subscription business, then what counts as being actually active and on the platform? Do we count free trial users? Do we count anyone who signed a contract? If they left the platform and they came back, then at what point do we count them again? So as you can see, there are many different ways to actually count this value of number of customers. And at work, many teams are often using very different definitions of the number of customers without actually realizing it. Now, as an example, let's take subscription businesses. They will have a few different versions of this customer's number that they're tracking. So we will track things like newly acquired customers. We'll track things like churned customers. And from those two numbers, we will track net customers. So in this case, we'd actually call them subscribers. So newly acquired subscribers, churned subscribers, and net new subs. As you can see, on its own, the top line number of customers doesn't really tell you the full picture. You need to look at things like LTV, CAC, and churn to start to understand the story behind the numbers. Metric number 7 is NPS, or Net Promoter Score. And don't make the rookie mistake of saying NPS score, which is Net Promoter Score. So all of the metrics that we've been covering so far give us a picture of a company's financial health, but none of them answer this question, which is, of all the customers that you have, how do they actually feel about you? So Net Promoter Score is calculated by asking people, well, how likely are you to recommend us to a friend? And then we take the percent of people who answered highly and subtract the percent of people who answered with a really low score. And then we convert that to a scale of -100 to 100. Netflix's NPS sits at around 50, let's say, which is pretty good. And that means that for every one of their customers who then brings in another friend, that's a customer that they just acquired for free. So high NPS actually brings CAC down. And the lower your NPS is, the more it's a leading indicator that revenue might drop and churn might increase, because usually if satisfaction goes down, then the dollars you earn and the number of people who stay with you also goes down. So that's how these metrics are related to each other. In practice on the job, usually we also wouldn't look at just one high level NPS. We would also break NPS down by some key customer dimensions. So we might slice it by region, we might slice it by age, or any other demographic information that we understand, so that we can start to relay this to a customer experience, marketing, or product team. So family 4 is funnel health, which in my opinion are some of the more fun and interesting metrics to work with. It tells you about the customer journey from going from a stranger to becoming a loyal paying customer. So metric 8 here is the concept of the conversion rate. So at any step in the customer journey, there are milestones that happen to move from becoming a stranger who wasn't aware of your company in the first place to becoming a paying customer. For example, for Netflix, they're definitely tracking the number of people who land on their homepage and actually sign up for a paid account. And then for an e-com company, let's say Sephora, they're tracking the number of people who land on a targeted ad, then they click on that ad, they go to the website, then they track the percent of people who on that website actually add something to their cart, and then they track what percent of those people actually check out their cart and fulfill their order. And a consulting company, for example, is going to track the number of initial conversations they have that actually turn into paid contracts. So again, it's all about tracking the percent of people that move through each step of starting from being a stranger to becoming a paid customer. And every business has this concept of the funnel. So this is where we go from that top line question of what's happening in revenue to actually being able to dive into what's driving those changes in revenue, what's a bottleneck there, and being able to answer that question, what should we actually do about it? Here is a tip for the next time you have an interview, is to go to a company's website and actually map out their customer journey as if you were going from a stranger to a paid customer. So what is their funnel? What are all the different different milestones in that journey to go from being an unaware customer to actually checking out or paying for their services? And what are the metrics that you would actually track to understand the performance at every single step? Now, most people do not do this. So if you understand a company's funnel before you step into that conversation and it shows, you're already going to sound like someone who's been working in that job for a few months. So metric 9 and 10 are actually two sides of the same coin, and they are retention and churn. So while conversion tells you how effective you are at bringing people into the business, retention and churn tell you how effective you are at keeping them. So while retention is the percent of people who stay with you, churn is the flip side of that. It's the percent of people who leave. So let's take Netflix again as an example. They spend millions of dollars every year investing in creating new content, creating new shows, because they know what it does for customer retention. If you are signing on to Netflix at 11 p.m. to watch the last 3 episodes of your favorite show and you're getting hooked, you're obviously not opening the app to then cancel and churn. And Netflix knows this, so they invest accordingly. So in an interview or a stakeholder conversation, especially if you're working with anyone close to the product or operation side, it can be really insightful to ask questions about retention and churn because it will help you understand who their customers are. So a question like, what are trends in retention recently? And how does that determine some of the strategic priorities at the company? Or something like, what are trends in churn? And how has the team used data to try to drive decisions and recommendations to help address it? So these are just some examples of really good questions that you can ask at the end of interviews or in coffee chats to signal your understanding of business metrics, but also show that you really care about the customer base at the company. So retention and churn are definitely metrics that anyone working close to a product or customer experience team will need to know. So those are the top 10 metrics that I recommend starting with. As you can see, it's not about memorizing formulas because the metrics are going to differ based on what kind of company and role you're actually working in. It's much more about a way of thinking. So, how's money coming in? How's money going out? How much of it are we keeping? Who are our customers? And how quickly do they become a customer and how much do they actually stay? The more fluidly you can move between these kinds of questions, the more naturally you're going to be able to speak the language of business, the more you're going to be able to actually tell the story behind the numbers instead of sounding like a dashboard. That's what companies are really looking at today. As I mentioned, I put together a free business metrics cheat sheet for you guys so that you can learn these metrics and much more depending on whatever industry you are interested in applying to. So if you want to save a lot of time Googling, make sure to download that down below. And if you're interested in taking this a step further and really understanding business metrics in a structured way so that you can stand out in the job market and on the job, then check out my mentorship program down below. I'm going to leave a link at the bottom. And that's it for this video. I will see you guys in the next one.